Hello and welcome to Round 3 Reviews, back with a Hong Kong content review, diving more into Soi Cheang's kind of filmography after doing quite a few of his films on the channel recently with Motorway from Chameleon Films, his mega kind of massive hit right now with Twilight of the Warriors, which is again the two kind of prequel and a sequel, so there's a trilogy idea right there, and diving into some of his other films prior to that with Accident and of course Limbo. This one is one that I've been wanting to track down for quite some time. I wanted to see a few more of his films and his filmography, and I figured, hey, good opportunity to kind of talk more about this director and to kind of discuss more about his filmography and his films. And this is his second feature debut with New Blood, released in 2002. And essentially this is his love letter to Korean and J-horror movies in a nutshell. It's a very low budget film, very short runtime of an hour and a half, and it is oozing with atmosphere from start to finish. This is a very interesting little project. I didn't know much about this really going in. I knew the basic concept, and the storyline for this film is very simple but very, very effective. It essentially is a police officer finds a couple that have committed suicide. Essentially, they have slit their wrists. You know, the woman has basically cancer and is not long to live, and the guy we don't know really much about. He's just kind of someone who was in love with this person and willing to go out with her in their own terms. Essentially, he responds on scene. He manages to respond quickly and get them to hospital. Unfortunately, the woman does pass while the boyfriend does remain in a coma, and his life is saved by emergency kind of donor. And the boyfriend is saved and put into a coma through kind of emergency kind of donors through AB kind of blood type, essentially. And three strangers in the room, one being the actual cop itself, and two other characters that we get to know as the film goes along, who have basically donated blood to help both of them, and obviously one of them only kind of survives from the outcome. And that's when things start to get a bit creepy, start to get weird, and some twists and turns do happen. You find out more about all three of these characters, and they're kind of, who they are, what they're doing, essentially, one being a cop and one being a kind of an engineer, structural engineer, working in kind of, underground facilities and electric and stuff and construction sites, and the other one is got a bit of a dark past, who is not quite mentally stable, and that's explored to the kind of the film's benefit, while other kind of creepy, ghosty, kind of J-horror based stuff happens throughout the film. And while I say the film itself isn't perfect, while I say it does go on a little bit too long maybe than it should have done, being the fact it is quite a low budget film, it doesn't go for all those jump scares, it doesn't go for all these big massive ideas. It keeps itself contained, it keeps it very kind of focused, and it keeps it fresh as it goes along. It's trying to give you this real dread sense of atmosphere, very similar to a Japanese J-horror, the presence of this ghost, this woman who felt wronged. My lover, my boyfriend is, suffering, he's in a coma, we were meant to go together, you robbed us of this, why have you done this? And she is targeting all three of these characters because they've given blood, and there's a connection there. So it gets very kind of supernatural and very creepy and very weird, and the characters are experiencing kind of hallucinations, and there's weird things happening to them. I definitely feel like there could have been a bit more of an escalation throughout the film. I definitely feel there could have been a little bit more of a kind of a push, but I understand this type of film, and for the director being his second feature, being the limitations of the budget, you can only do so much. So what can you do if you have a limited amount of budget for your horror movie? You keep it interesting, you keep it fresh as much as you can. You have interesting characters to the best of their abilities, and you have a storyline that's compelling, and you want to see what happens, what unrails as the film goes along. There are some deaths that do happen in the film, and there are some kind of interesting kind of location choices and kind of visual kind of set moments, which I think is quite impressive, especially the underground sequence when you see the kind of the sparks of electricity, and then you got the daytime sequence as well, which is also quite good. So it definitely does experiment with different kind of lighting, and kind of the editing, and the soundtrack is very specific, and all that helps create this sense of moody, kind of dreadful atmosphere, which really does help the film's benefit. Apart from essentially the main protagonist, which isn't the actual cop, but more the woman in this case, where she is basically has a history of her mental illness, and there is something going on with her that links into what's going on in the actual film, which is quite interesting, and that's explored heavily within the film, especially towards the second and going into the third act, which definitely starts to kind of keep you more engaged as it goes along. You've got witch doctors come into it, you've got priests, you've got all sorts of little sub-characters that do play at that part, leading up to some pretty interesting ideas of possession and, what is real, what is not, what's, can this ghost mess with your reality, mess with what you're seeing, what you're doing, essentially. The overall story and where the film goes, I don't want to give that away. I think it's best to keep that in the film. I definitely think it's worth a second viewing to kind of see how some of those kind of plot points kind of come into it. So I definitely think it benefits from a second viewing. I definitely think it benefits from a eventual Blu-ray release, hopefully Chameleon Films maybe down the line for that potentially, being the fact they are diving into this director, and I think there's definitely a potential this film could get a good release and find a new audience. It's definitely one of those films that is forgotten about and not talked about, and thanks to this director's kind of new fame now, international fame, that could potentially be possible. New Blood definitely deserves a new audience. It definitely deserves a little bit of attention, and I definitely think there is a distributor that can give this film a really good release and give this film a bit more of a kind of talking point within the kind of community again. So it's definitely one to check out. That's been my thoughts and opinions on New Blood. What are your thoughts, guys? Please comment down below. What are your thoughts and opinions on the director? Any other films of his that I've yet to check out would you recommend? Please comment down below. So in the meantime, guys, I'm for the reviews. Signing out.